Nightline is proudly sponsored by Ansett Australia, one of the world's great airlines.
A 4-day killing spree ends with 2 men charged and another taking his own life. A new procedure gives premature babies a better chance of survival, and the latest mobile phone system beats the overload but creates new problems of its own.
From National 9 News, this is Nightline with Jim Whaley.
Good evening. The northern New South Wales towns of Armidale and Glen Innes are still trying to cope in the aftermath of the killing rampage in which 4 people died. It finally ended at a farmhouse where self-confessed killer Leonard Leabeater apparently shot himself rather than surrender. His young partner, Robert Steele, who gave himself up, and another man, Raymond Bassett, have been charged over 3 of the murders.
Just before midday, the 27-hour standoff ended when police discovered the body of Leonard Leabeater inside the remote farmhouse. The 41-year-old man had shot himself in the head after police negotiations failed to reach a peaceful solution.
I'd like to just put a gun to my head and go and bang, but I don't believe I'm entitled to do that. That's the one crime of suicide, so this is the best way I can get around it.
During the hours when police negotiators had tried to calm the man down, locals prayed for a quick resolution.
All the drama is, with the drama being on, no one's used to that sort of atmosphere around here. It's a very quiet and staged settlement.
CP to all units from negotiators, the offender Roberts is talking about coming out and he will shoot any police he sees.
At dawn, the second gunman, 22-year-old Robert Steele, did walk from the farmhouse, but he was unarmed.
The only thing in his hand was a cigarette.
Shortly after, a muffled noise was heard from the farmhouse. All was quiet inside, and telephone conversations with Leabeater had stopped. When officers eventually rushed the building, they found the man dead. During the tense siege, the only shots fired were by the 2 gunmen, as darkness fell yesterday on the isolated property.
They're both coming out to go hunting. We're on a high-level alert as of now.
4 shots were fired, but police didn't retaliate. 100 kilometres away at Glen Innes, detectives were questioning the first gunman who gave himself up yesterday. 25-year-old Raymond Bassett was released with 2 children, 11-year-old Trevor Lasserre and his 9-year-old sister Tonya. Bassett had spent the night in Armidale before appearing in court today. Charged with 3 counts of murder, he was refused bail. Steele is also charged with 3 counts of murder and appeared in Glen Innes court today. The prosecution alleged he had admitted to 2 murders in Queensland and he had threatened to shoot and kill police. He was also refused bail. Both men have been remanded in custody to reappear in Armidale Court on Monday. Jane Henschke for Nightline.
It's believed Leonard Leabeater lived for many years in Sydney's eastern suburbs. Robert Mark Steele has spent most of his 22 years in northern New South Wales. The pair were joined in their travels by Raymond Bassett, described by his accomplices as retarded. For much of the past year, the trio lived in this house in the South Australian town of Butte. They wanted to turn the building into a home for the mentally ill that had their application rejected.
I was under the impression that they were non-drinkers, and they certainly caused no problem swallowing the town.
The trio left Butte 4 weeks ago, travelling north through Queensland and out towards Mount Isa. It is here in early March Robert Steele admits to murdering 27-year-old Mark Barlow for money.
What a waste of good, honest people. I mean, they didn't really deserve to die in this way.
The trio moved south to the tropical caravan park at Mackay. There they met 14-year-old Deborah Gale, all 4 travelling a fortnight later to Dalby. Steele admitted to killing his new teenage girlfriend on the outskirts of Dalby because she threatened to go to the police.
Do you have any remorse about killing her?
Oh, a little bit, not much. I try not to think about it.
Why should they live? And people here that have been released from jail or something, what are they going to do next?
Steele claims he killed because he's a psychopath. The gang's self-confessed leader, Leabeater, wanted revenge, claiming he was falsely accused of indecently assaulting 2 young girls on a South Australian beach last year.
This whole exercise has been an expensive way to die, but I mean, if they want to continue to try and put people behind bars for what they didn't do, then people every so often, somebody's going to jack up and take it to them.
Mark Ferguson, for Nightline.
In Adelaide, an armed youth has surrendered to police, ending a frightening afternoon for students at a suburban high school. A boy and a girl were hit by ricochets during a 3-hour siege. Several others also needed hospital treatment.
I've got people inside the school. We're going to try and get the students out if we can.
As heavily armed police swarmed onto the scene, the youth fled first to the roof, then the upper floor of a school building, threatening anyone in sight.
And he wants to kill as many police officers as possible, that's his exact words. He'll take a shot at anyone he sees leaving around the school, anywhere at all. If any helicopters or aeroplanes go past, he's going to shoot at them.
As some students were evacuated out of the line of fire, others were forced to seek cover in classrooms. Several hundred students were evacuated to the school's gymnasium, taking shelter as armed police moved through the buildings. After an hour, the distressed children were able to run to safety, ambulance officers struggling to cope as more than 30 collapsed, suffering shock. Then, just before 4:30, the breakthrough. The youth walked downstairs and surrendered to police, officers seizing his weapon. He's been taken to Holden Hill Police Station for questioning, while the wounded students remain in a satisfactory condition.
Feelings ran hot in a Melbourne court today when a 56-year-old man appeared on charges of murdering 6-year-old Cherie Beasley in 1991. A solicitor for Robert Lowe told the magistrate he was concerned about his client's safety while in custody. Cherie's mother then shouted from the gallery that he should be housed with other prisoners, apparently because she believes the other inmates will deal out their own style of justice. The magistrate was forced to clear the court. He later remanded Lowe in custody. The first months of life have always been touch and go for premature babies, but now a new treatment has seen their chances of survival increase dramatically.
Of all premature babies, most at risk are those born 10 to 12 weeks early. With still a third of their embryonic life not fully developed, they struggle against the biggest killer of preterm babies, breathing problems. But now this revolutionary treatment, injected down a tube into the lungs, has seen the survival rate jump to 85%.
Well, we are very delighted. It's just made our branch of medicine more and more enjoyable now that we have a means of greatly improving their chances of survival.
The turnaround involves surfactant, a human substance that keeps the lungs expanded. It was missing in half the preemie babies, but since a synthetic replacement treatment was started in neonatal intensive care units 2 years ago, it saved thousands of lives. At $1,200 per baby, the surfactant treatment has added $78,000 in this unit alone to an ever-decreasing hospital budget. But when more babies are surviving and with fewer complications, the benefits far outweigh the costs.
Very thankful and very lucky. We feel very lucky. So we've got two hopefully healthy little boys from now on.
One of Margaret Roberts' twins, Lachlan, was so ill after an emergency caesarean birth 2 weeks ago, she was told to expect the worst. But after surfactant treatment, his respiratory distress stabilised. Now out of intensive care, he's ready to go home in a fortnight, the same time as brother Angus. Cheryl Taylor from Nightline.
After the break, the Liberals finally bury the GST, and UN investigators demand war crime trials after uncovering a massacre in Croatia. John Hewson's period of mourning for the GST came to an abrupt end today when the Liberals finally forced him to bury it. The opposition leader declared the GST dead the day after his election defeat, but then showed signs of a second coming. Peter Harvey in Canberra has this report.
When Dr. Hewson arrived for the second day of the Liberals' election post-mortem, he was still insisting his goods and services tax should not be unceremoniously dumped.
But we should do it in an orderly way, not sort of, panicking in a knee-jerk reaction on the basis of one day's discussion.
But his colleagues disagreed. From the moment this soul-searching had started, the overwhelming view was to see the GST go for good. John Hewson didn't give them a commitment until this afternoon, by which stage he had no alternative.
We will proceed now to review all our policies between now and the next election, and UNCL reviewed all policies with the exception of the GST tax reform package stand.
It was an embarrassing defeat for the opposition leader. He kept the GST option open, even though almost all his colleagues were blaming it for their election defeat. But still, Dr. Hewson put the best face on it.
We are, in the end, the servants of the people. We know the electorate will not wear a GST.
Some argued that Dr. Hewson should have been allowed to save face by phasing the controversial tax out of policy. That was rejected, along with a suggestion that the tax could come back in another form.
No, it does not mean that in any way at all. A goods and services tax, as it stands, is finished. But there are other ways of skinning the cat.
It's not just the GST that's gone. Politically damaging sections of the Coalition's industrial relations policy, like the proposed youth wage, will also be jettisoned.
I think that was unpopular and probably a mistake.
Tomorrow, more problems for John Hewson, finding a compromise with the National Party over the makeup of the new shadow cabinet. Peter Harvey reporting for Nightline.
Tim Marcus Clark, the former managing director of the failed State Bank of South Australia, could face criminal charges over his role in the bank's takeover of two failed companies. The State Auditor General's report has recommended an investigation, saying Mr. Clark's actions might have involved a conflict of interest and a breach of his duties. In Sydney, the parliamentary inquiry into the Angus Rig affair, where a teenager suffered brain damage after trying to hang himself in a police cell, has recommended that Police Commissioner Tony Lauer should keep his job, despite questions over his conduct. It's also found that while the former Minister, Ted Pickering, was given the police report on the incident, he might not have read it because he was on holidays. Former West Australian Labor Premier Brian Burke is to stand trial on fraud charges. He's accused of falsely obtaining $17,000 from a parliamentary travel account during the mid-80s.
During the 9-day preliminary hearing, the prosecution